Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to At the Bar, hosted by yours truly, Ryan Carter. This week, I'm doing another classic cocktail, the Whiskey Sour. It was actually recommended by Kayla Shelton from Beltway Brewing Company during our most recent podcast episode in the Beer for Every Mood miniseries. Now, the Whiskey Sour is a very simple drink, as most of these classic cocktails are, with just whiskey, your choice of sour citrus fruit, typically lemon or lime juice, and simple syrup. That's it. And it has a relatively simple but practical history. It was first written down by Jerry Thomas in his book The Bartender's Guide in 1862, but the recipe had been around for a while before that, and it was actually very popular on sailing ships. At the time, in the 17 and 1800s, medicine hadn't come as far as it is today, and we didn't really understand germs all that well. So when you would be on these boats that were sailing across the ocean, and it would take months at a time, your rations would often spoil, including your drinking water. So the crews on these ships would oftentimes keep liquor on hand to have something that was relatively safe to drink and was fun to drink as well, because when you're stuck on a boat for months at a time, you don't really have a ton that you can do for fun. So during that period of time when they were trying to figure out what all these different afflictions were and how to prevent them, a very popular one on boats primarily was scurvy. And a good way to prevent getting scurvy was to drink citrus juice. So, lemon, lime, orange juice, all that stuff helps prevent scurvy. So a Vice Admiral, Edward Vernon of England, began putting lemon and lime juice in his cocktails that he would serve to his crew to help prevent the scurvy that they were getting. And this became very popular, and once it got to different countries and got on land and was in bars, they refined the drink more, so it was a little bit better tasting and a little bit easier to palate, and that is what ended up in Jerry Thomas's 1862 book. Now, the original recipe called for 1 large teaspoonful of powdered white sugar dissolved in a little seltzer, added to the juice of half a lemon, and then in a wine glass of bourbon or rye whiskey. So the recipe hasn't really changed too much since 1862. But now that we have simple syrup, you don't have to put powdered or granulated sugar in your drinks. The simple syrup dissolves in there better, and it helps water down the whiskey flavor. But very practical background, helping your crew prevent scurvy and also still being able to get drunk at the same time. And back then, everybody thinks whiskey's a rough drink to have now, unless you're a whiskey fan. But imagine being alive when it was first being invented and still kind of even rougher and unrefined. So adding the juice kind of helped make that flavor a little bit more palatable. So let's go on over to the bar and see how to make the whiskey sour. Okay, so for the whiskey sour, you're going to want to start with a shaker glass filled with ice. It's really very simple. There's only the 3 ingredients that you're mixing together. You want to start out with your bourbon. 2 ounces of bourbon is going to go in there first. Now, you can also use rye whiskey. That's totally fine. Most of the recipes that you'll find will call for bourbon, but I read that rye tastes just as good in there. It's up to you which type of whiskey you prefer, really, at that point. So after your whiskey goes in, you're going to put your half ounce of lemon juice in there. Now, I read a bunch of different recipes on this one, and they all had different quantities. So I picked the one that was kind of the most neutral. And I don't like an overpowering lemon flavor in a lot of my cocktails, especially one that has whiskey in it. So I picked one that had a smaller quantity of lemon juice in there. You can increase that quantity if you like that lemon flavor more. And then to balance out the flavors and not get too much of a sour, we're going to go ahead and put a half ounce of simple syrup. Now, fun thing about simple syrup is it's really easy to make at home. So obviously you can go buy some at the store. I did, clearly it's a branded bottle, but once you run out of that, you can just make it at home with water and sugar. It's just equal parts water and sugar. You put it in a pot on the stove, just boil it until the sugar dissolves, cool it, and then you're good to go. That's it. Super simple, super easy. That's why they call it simple syrup. And it'll save you some money if you start making your own. So once you got everything in your shaker, go ahead and give it a shake. And then we're just gonna strain into a old-fashioned glass with ice in it. And now, as you can see, there's this really pretty yellow flavor. The lemon juice really shines through in this drink. And you can garnish a couple different ways. You don't have to garnish if you don't want to. That's the beauty of a garnish, is it's not mandatory. But this, you know, if you want to stick with what you might usually see in something like an old-fashioned or a whiskey sour, you can put a maraschino cherry or two in there. They don't really change the flavor too much, but the nice thing is they kind of add a little bit of sweetness so that you're not getting a super biting flavor. So let's go ahead and give her a try. Yeah, so you get that hint of lemon in there, but it's not overpowering. The simple syrup definitely helps mellow that out, and the bourbon is a wonderful whiskey to mix with because it is a kind of sweeter flavor to it. For those of you that aren't the biggest fans of whiskey and are maybe a little hesitant to try some of these whiskey drinks, this might be a really good one for you because it does have a couple of other things in it to kind of mellow out that whiskey flavor. Unlike an old-fashioned where it's pretty much just whiskey, simple syrup, and then a few shakes of bitters, you've actually got lemon juice in here and a ½ ounce of simple syrup. So those combined with the bourbon actually really mellow that flavor out, and you don't really get the biting burn that you normally would from a whiskey. So I enjoyed that. I think you guys will too. Cheers, and we'll see you next week.